The XLNR were feared across the galaxy. They were not just warriors. They were conquerors, predators, and rulers of countless worlds. Their massive armored bodies made them nearly impossible to harm. Their sharp claws could tear through steel. Their minds were built for war, and for thousands of years they had crushed every civilization that stood in their way. To them, the universe had only one law: the strong survive, the weak perish. And so, when they first heard about humans, they barely paid attention. Humans were small, fragile, and weak compared to the mighty XLNR. They had no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs, no thick armor. They didn't have superior strength or advanced technology. Their home planet, Earth, was not even the richest world that XLNR had conquered. It was just another place to take, another species to rule. So the XLNR warlords laughed. Conquering humans would be easy. It would be quick. They were wrong. The invasion began with a single XLNR war fleet carrying thousands of their best warriors. As they reached the edge of Earth's solar system, they watched from orbit, scanning the planet's surface. Their technology detected major cities, military bases, and communication networks. They saw humans going about their daily lives, completely unaware of the danger above them. It was almost disappointing. "This will be over in a day," one XLNR commander muttered. "We have faced real threats before. This is nothing." The order was given. From the darkness of space, massive XLNR warships descended, entering Earth's atmosphere. They blocked out the sky, casting shadows over entire cities. People looked up in fear and confusion. Some ran. Others tried to fight. It didn't matter. The XLNR landed with force, their warriors spreading through the streets. They were taller than any human, their thick armor reflecting bullets like pebbles. They crushed tanks, tore through defenses, and destroyed entire buildings with their powerful weapons. No human soldier could stand against them in direct combat. City after city fell. Human governments collapsed. Their armies were scattered. Within a week, the XLNR declared victory. Earth belonged to them now, but something was wrong. Unlike the other species they had conquered, humans didn't surrender completely. Most civilizations, when faced with the power of the XLNR, accepted their fate. Some tried to resist, but their rebellions were weak. They fought only for survival. Humans. They fought for something more. Even after losing their cities, their homes, and their leaders, humans did not stop. They did not beg for mercy. They did not hide in fear. Instead, they changed. They adapted. At first, the XLNR ignored the small human attacks. A destroyed patrol here, a missing supply ship there. It meant nothing. The XLNR controlled the planet. A few scattered rebels couldn't change that. But the attacks didn't stop. They became faster. They became deadlier. They became impossible to predict. XLNR warlords started dying. Their supply routes were cut off. Entire bases vanished overnight. The mighty warriors who had once ruled with fear now found themselves being hunted. The XLNR did not understand. How? They are weak. They should be broken. But humans had never been weak. The XLNR had mistaken human kindness for softness. They had mistaken human patience for weakness, and they had made the worst mistake of all. They thought they were the only predators in the galaxy. They were about to learn the truth. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was the deadliest species the universe had ever seen. And now, humanity was coming for them. The war was supposed to be over. The XLNR had declared victory. Their warlords stood in the ruins of Earth's greatest cities, claiming the planet as their own. Smoke filled the skies, and the ground was littered with broken buildings, shattered vehicles, and the remains of those who had fought back. The mighty XLNR Empire had conquered thousands of worlds before, and this conquest had been no different. Humanity had resisted, but their weapons had been weak. Their armies had been crushed. Their leaders had either surrendered or vanished. Earth had fallen, or so that Excelnar believed. The first sign of trouble came in the form of whispers. Across the occupied zones, small groups of humans refused to accept defeat. At first, they were scattered and disorganized, nothing more than survivors hiding in the ruins. The Excelnar paid them no attention. What could a few frightened creatures do against a species that had ruled the stars for centuries? But then, strange things started happening. A Excelnar patrol went missing. A group of soldiers, fully armed and trained for battle, simply vanished one night while patrolling the streets of what had once been New York City. The next morning, their bodies were found hanging from the remains of a collapsed bridge. A supply transport, carrying food and weapons for the Excelnar forces, exploded before reaching its destination. The explosion was too precise, too well planned to be an accident. The warlords grew suspicious. The humans were supposed to be defeated. Yet something was wrong. And then, the real war began. The attacks increased. Small at first, an ambush on Excelnar outpost, a sniper eliminating a high-ranking officer, a transport ship hijacked and flown straight into an enemy base. The Excelnar tried to fight back, but their enemy was no longer standing in front of them. Humans had changed their tactics. They no longer fought like soldiers. They fought like hunters. They struck from the shadows and disappeared before the Excelnar could react. They used their own technology against them, hacking into communications, disrupting supply lines, and planting explosives in key locations. They had no ships, no armies, no advanced weapons, yet they were winning battles. The Excelnar warlords grew frustrated. "This is not war," one of them growled. "This is cowardice." But deep inside, they felt something they had never felt before: fear. The Excelnar increased their patrols, searching for the humans who dared to resist. They sent more warriors, more ships, more weapons. They hunted down survivors, capturing them, questioning them, trying to find the leaders of the rebellion. But there were no leaders. Every human fought as if they were part of a single mind. When one group fell, another took their place. When a city was locked down, the attacks moved to the forests, the mountains, the underground tunnels. The Excelnar were used to fighting organized armies, but this was different. This was something else entirely. The humans had turned the entire planet into a battlefield. Every building was a potential trap. Every shadow hid an enemy. Every piece of technology could be a weapon. And worst of all, the humans were learning. They adapted to every new strategy the Excelnar tried. They studied their weaknesses. They exploited their mistakes. The Excelnar had called themselves the ultimate predators. But now, they were starting to wonder if they had made a mistake. Perhaps they had misjudged their prey. One night, in the ruins of a destroyed human military base, a Excelnar warlord stood with his elite soldiers. They had received reports of human survivors hiding in the area. They had come to finish them off. The night was silent. Too silent. The warlord signaled to his soldiers to move forward. Their armor gleamed under the pale moonlight as they stepped over broken walls and shattered weapons. And then, a gunshot rang out. The warlord's second-in-command fell. A hole burned through his helmet. The Excelnar warriors spun around, weapons raised, but there was no enemy in sight. Then the explosives went off. Fire and smoke engulfed the area as the ground beneath them erupted. The warlord was thrown to the ground, his armor dented, his soldiers screaming. From the shadows, the humans emerged. Not soldiers, not an army. Hunters. They moved quickly, silently, striking with precision. They didn't waste bullets. They didn't fight for honor. They fought to win. The warlord roared in rage, firing his weapon wildly. But the humans were already gone, vanishing into the darkness. For the first time in his life, the warlord felt something he had never felt before. He was being hunted. Across the planet, the rebellion grew. The Excelnar, once so confident in their victory, now found themselves trapped in a war they could not control. Their supply lines were cut. Their warriors were afraid to patrol alone. Their high command received reports of entire bases disappearing overnight. The humans had refused to surrender. The humans had refused to die. And now, the XLNR were beginning to understand a terrible truth. They had not conquered Earth. They had only started a war they could not win. And humanity was just getting started. The XLNR had never faced anything like this before. On every world they had conquered, resistance had always been the same: weak, disorganized, and hopeless. The moment their armies arrived, most civilizations either surrendered or crumbled within weeks. The XLNR were used to victory. They were used to ruling through fear. But Earth was different. No matter how many humans they killed, no matter how many cities they destroyed, the war would not end. The XLNR believed they had won. Instead, they had awakened something terrifying. They had turned humans into hunters. The first sign of real trouble came when an entire XLNR military outpost went silent. The base had been well defended, surrounded by thick walls and automated turrets. Hundreds of soldiers had been stationed there, guarding weapons, vehicles, and supplies. One morning, without warning, all communication from the outpost stopped. A XLNR scout team was sent to investigate. When they arrived, they found the gates wide open. At first, it looked like the base had been abandoned. No signs of battle, no gunfire, no destruction. But then they found the bodies. XLNR warriors lay scattered across the outpost, their weapons untouched, their throats slit with precise cuts. Some had been dragged into dark corners, hidden under vehicles or inside buildings. Others had been left out in the open, their lifeless eyes staring at the sky. The base had not been attacked. It had been hunted, and there was not a single human body in sight. Across the planet, the same pattern repeated. XLNR patrols would march into the ruins of the city, only to vanish without a trace. A supply convoy would travel through a safe route, only for the lead vehicle to explode, blocking the path as hidden gunmen eliminated the survivors. Humans had abandoned traditional warfare. They did not fight in open battles. They did not charge into the enemy's guns. Instead, they used stealth, patience, and precision. They turned every street, every building, every forest into a battlefield. The XLNR's superior technology gave them no advantage. Their energy shields were useless when a sniper's bullet found the exposed gap between their helmets. Their armor could not protect them from traps, explosives hidden in doorways, steel wires stretched across hallways, poison slipped into their water supplies. Every time they thought they had cornered the enemy, the humans would vanish. Every time they believed they were safe, the humans would strike. And worst of all, the humans were getting better. Inside a captured human city, XLNR warlord Vorkon stood in the command center, his claws clenched into fists. The reports in front of him made no sense. "This is impossible," he growled, slamming his fist against the table. "How can these creatures keep attacking us? They have no fleet. They have no reinforcements. We control their planet." His advisors remained silent. None of them had an answer. Perhaps one of them finally spoke. "Perhaps we underestimated them." Vorkon bared his teeth in anger. Underestimated. The very idea was absurd. Humans were weak. Their bodies were fragile. Their weapons were primitive. And yet, somehow, they were winning. "This is not a war," Vorkon muttered, his voice low. "This is a hunt." And for the first time in his life, he realized something terrifying. The XLNR were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. Desperate to regain control, the XLNR changed tactics. They increased their patrols, sent out more scouts, deployed more ships into orbit to monitor human movements. It did not matter. Humans adapted. They moved underground, using old subway tunnels and hidden bunkers. They stopped using radios and communicated through coded messages, delivered by runners. They studied captured Selenar weapons, modifying them for their own use. And they learned. Every ambush, every attack, every mission taught them something new about their enemy. They found weaknesses in Selenar armor, blind spots in their vision, patterns in their patrols. They shared this knowledge with one another, passing it from one survivor to the next. The Selenar had expected a quick victory. Instead, they had created an army of hunters. One night, in the ruins of a destroyed city, a group of Selenar warriors marched through the empty streets. They moved cautiously, weapons raised, scanning every shadow. They knew humans were near. And then, without warning, the lights went out. The street lamps, the glowing signs, the Selenar's own electronic displays, everything was swallowed by darkness. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the first shot rang out. A Selenar soldier collapsed, a bullet piercing his skull. The others spun around, searching for the attacker. Another shot, another soldier down. Panic set in. The Selenar fired blindly into the darkness, their weapons lighting up the night. But they hit nothing. The humans were moving unseen, striking with deadly precision. One by one, the Selenar warriors fell. The last survivor, wounded and gasping for breath, crawled toward his fallen comrades. He reached for his communicator, desperate to call for help. Then he felt a cold blade press against his throat. A human voice whispered in his ear, "This is our planet now." And then, darkness. The war had changed. The Selenar were no longer conquerors. They were no longer rulers. They were victims. Humanity had been underestimated. And now, the Selenar were paying the price. The hunt had begun. The Selenar Empire had never known fear. For thousands of years, they had ruled the stars, crushing every species that dared to resist them. Their armies were unmatched, their technology superior. They had always been the hunters, the apex predators of the galaxy. But now, on Earth, everything was different. The humans were not just fighting back. They were winning. The warlords gathered in their command center, deep inside their most fortified base on Earth. Massive holoscreens displayed battlefield reports, casualty numbers, and tactical maps. Every report told the same story. They were losing ground. Warlord Vorkon, the supreme commander of the invasion, clenched his claws as he studied the data. It made no sense. The humans had no warships, no planetary defenses, no reinforcements from other worlds. And yet, every day, the Selenar lost more soldiers, more bases, more control over the planet. "This is unacceptable," growled one of the generals. "We have burned their cities, destroyed their armies. How can they still fight?" "Because they are not fighting a war," Vorkon said, his voice cold. "They are hunting us." The room fell silent. The truth was clear now. The humans were not engaging in direct battles. They had abandoned traditional warfare. Instead, they struck from the shadows, setting traps, ambushing patrols, assassinating officers. They had turned Earth into a battlefield where every street, every forest, every ruin was a weapon against the invaders. And the Selenar had no way to fight back. One by one, the Selenar's most secure bases started falling. A heavily armed supply convoy, escorted by elite warriors, was obliterated when a human ambush caused a landslide, crushing the entire transport under tons of rock. A high-ranking warlord was found dead in his quarters, a single bullet hole in his skull. The security cameras showed nothing. The assassin had come and gone like a ghost. A group of Selenar engineers, responsible for maintaining the planetary communication network, were discovered in the wreckage of their shuttle. The craft had been sabotaged mid-flight. The humans had learned their weaknesses. They knew how to strike where it hurt the most. And worst of all, they had no fear. The Selenar commanders, desperate to regain control, changed their tactics. They sent out massive patrols, searching for human hideouts. They deployed more drones, more sensors, more surveillance technology. Any human caught resisting was punished severely. Entire settlements were wiped out in an attempt to break the human spirit. But it didn't work. The more the Excelnar pushed, the harder humanity fought back. They didn't surrender. They didn't run. They adapted. They moved deeper underground, using abandoned subway tunnels and hidden bunkers. They stopped relying on digital communications and instead passed messages through handwritten notes. They stole Selenar weapons, modified them, and used them against their invaders. Every attack became more precise, every ambush more deadly. The Excelnar had come to Earth believing themselves to be the ultimate predators. Now, they were realizing the truth. Humanity was more dangerous than any species they had ever faced. In one of the largest human-controlled zones, deep within the ruins of an old city, a meeting was taking place. Survivors from different regions had gathered, their faces lit only by the flickering flames of a small fire. Among them were former soldiers, engineers, hackers, and civilians who had taken up arms. One of them, a man named Daniel Carter, stood up. He had once been a military strategist, but now he was something more, a leader in the resistance. The Excelnar think they can still win, he said, looking at the tired but determined faces around him. They think they can break us. He glanced at a worn-out map covered in markings, showing enemy patrol routes, supply depots, and weak points in Excelnar defenses. But we know the truth. He pointed at the map. They're running out of time. Their supply lines are stretched thin. Their warriors are afraid to leave their bases. Their commanders are making mistakes. He took a deep breath, his voice filled with determination. We are not just fighting to survive anymore. His eyes burned with conviction. We are fighting to win. The people around him nodded, their resolve strengthening. It was time to take back their planet. Meanwhile, in the Selenar command center, panic was setting in. Another base had gone dark. Another patrol had disappeared. And now, the humans were no longer just attacking from the shadows. They were starting to take back territory. The Excelnar warlords could feel the tide shifting. Their invasion had started as a swift, unstoppable conquest. Now, it was turning into a desperate fight for survival. For the first time, they were facing an enemy that refused to break. And in the cold silence of their war room, Warlord Vorkhan finally understood something terrifying. They had underestimated humanity. And now, they were going to pay the price. The war was no longer about survival. It was about revenge. And humanity was just getting started. The war had changed. The Excelnar were no longer the unstoppable conquerors they once believed themselves to be. Their once mighty forces had been reduced to terrified squads, afraid to patrol the ruins of human cities. Their warships, which had once filled Earth's skies with dominance, were now targets for sabotage. Their leaders, once confident in their victory, now spent their nights in fortified bunkers, knowing that at any moment, a human bullet or blade could find them. Earth was no longer a conquered planet. It was a hunting ground, and the Excelnar were the prey. In a hidden underground bunker, deep beneath the shattered ruins of an old factory, Daniel Carter stood before a large map spread across a table. Around him, men and women, soldiers, engineers, hackers, and civilians turned warriors, listened carefully. "This is it," Carter said, tapping a marked location on the map. "This is the Excelnar's last major stronghold in the region. If we take it down, we cut off their supply lines. We force them into retreat." The resistance fighters murmured in agreement. A woman named Lisa, a former engineer who had become the group's best tech expert, stepped forward. "We've analyzed their security. Their defenses are weaker than before. Their turrets don't cover the eastern sector, and their supply trucks arrive every night at the same time. If we strike at the right moment, we can get inside." A former sniper, Marcus, nodded. "We take out their guards quietly, plant explosives, and disappear before they even know what happened." Carter looked around at the determined faces. The humans had suffered. They had lost friends, families, homes, But instead of breaking, they had become stronger. This was no longer just a battle. This was a message. Earth belonged to humans, and they were taking it back. That night, the operation began. The XLR base was a towering structure of metal and concrete, surrounded by high walls and automated turrets. It had once been an unbreakable fortress, a symbol of the Selenar's power. Now, it was just another target. In the darkness, the human fighters moved like shadows, their footsteps silent, their weapons ready. Marcus, positioned on a rooftop with his sniper rifle, whispered into his radio. "Guards at the gate, 3 of them. I'll take the one on the left." Carter's voice responded. "Take the shot." A single, suppressed gunshot echoed in the night. The first Selenar soldier collapsed without a sound. Before the others could react, 2 more shots followed. The entrance was clear. Lisa and her team rushed forward, placing explosives along the perimeter. They worked quickly, every movement precise, every second counted. Inside the base, the XLNR were unaware of the danger. They were tired, demoralized, their minds clouded with fear. Then the first explosion rocked the base. Alarms blared. Soldiers ran in confusion, searching for an enemy they could not see. That was when the real attack began. Carter led the charge, moving through the smoke and fire with deadly efficiency. The humans struck hard and fast, eliminating Selenar soldiers before they could regroup. Grenades were tossed into barracks. Control panels were overloaded with hacked signals, shutting down automated defenses. The XLNR, once feared across the galaxy, were falling apart. A panicked alien officer shouted into a communicator, "We are under attack. We need reinforcements now." But no reinforcements came. The humans had already sabotaged their communications. Inside the command center, Warlord Vorkhan watched the disaster unfold. His claws gripped the metal console as he listened to the screams of his soldiers. "This cannot be happening," he growled. For the first time, the XLNR were not the hunters. They were the hunted. A sudden explosion tore through the command center's doors. Smoke and fire filled the room. Through the haze, a figure emerged, Daniel Carter. Vorkhan raised his weapon, but Carter was faster. A single shot hit the warlord's hand, forcing him to drop his weapon. The Selenar commander looked at the human before him, seeing not a weak, defeated species, but something far worse. He saw a predator. Carter stepped closer, his voice calm. "You thought we were weak. You thought we would surrender." Vorkhan snarled in anger. "Your kind should have died." Carter tilted his head. "Maybe, but we didn't." He raised his weapon. "You lose." A single shot ended the warlord's reign. By dawn, the Selenar base was nothing more than ruins. Humanity had struck back, and they had won. Across the planet, the resistance grew stronger. More Selenar bases fell. More human territories were reclaimed. The invaders, once so confident in their victory, now realized the truth. They had made a mistake coming to Earth. And now, humanity was making sure they would never forget it. The Selenar invasion had started with fire and destruction. They had arrived in massive warships, their armies sweeping across cities like an unstoppable storm. They had crushed all resistance, confident that humanity would fall like every other species before them. But now, the storm was over, and the hunters had become the hunted. Across the world, human resistance forces launched their attacks. Every ruined city, every darkened street, every broken landscape became a battlefield. The Selenar had lost control. Supply lines were cut. Bases were overrun. Their forces, once so strong, were now weak and scattered. In the forests, human snipers picked off Selenar patrols one by one. In the mountains, ambush teams wiped out entire convoys before disappearing into the mist. In the ruins of old cities, resistance fighters used tunnels and underground passages to strike and vanish like ghosts. The XLNR had the best weapons, the best armor, the best ships. None of it mattered anymore. They were fighting an enemy that refused to die. Inside a hidden bunker beneath the wreckage of an old skyscraper, Daniel Carter stood before a table covered in maps and reports. Around him, his best fighters gathered, their faces hardened by war. Lisa, their best engineer, leaned over the map. The XLNR are pulling back. Their main forces are retreating to their last stronghold, the command center in New York. Marcus, their sniper, nodded. They know they've lost control. They're trying to escape. Carter's eyes narrowed. Then we don't give them that chance. He pointed at the map. This is where we ended. The final battle was coming. And this time, humanity would make sure the Selenar never came back. At the Selenar command center, panic spread like wildfire. Officers shouted into broken communication devices. Soldiers scrambled to defend the perimeter. Their once mighty war machines stood useless, damaged beyond repair. The mighty Selenar army had been reduced to survivors desperately clinging to their last fortress. Inside the main control room, Supreme Commander Varzul slammed his fist against the table. His eyes burned with rage as he glared at the reports flashing before him. "This is impossible," he growled. "They were supposed to be weak." A trembling officer spoke. "Sir, we have lost contact with all our bases. Our fleets in orbit have been destroyed or forced to retreat. If we don't leave now, we do not run," Varzul roared. "We are the XLNR. We are the rulers of the stars." But deep down, he knew the truth. They had lost, and the humans were coming for them. Night fell over New York. The ruins of the city were silent. The XLNR, waiting inside their command center, listened to the wind. Then, the silence was broken. A massive explosion ripped through the outer wall. Fire and smoke filled the sky. Before the XLNR could react, shadows moved through the rubble, silent, deadly, unstoppable. The humans had arrived. Carter led the charge. His team moved through the wreckage, striking with speed and precision. Grenades rolled into enemy bunkers, gunfire echoed through the ruins, and Selenar soldiers fell one by one. The aliens tried to fight back, but their shots hit nothing but empty air. The humans were too fast, too smart. They had learned everything about their enemy. How they moved, how they fought, how they died. The XLNR had once been the apex predators. Now, they were nothing more than cornered beasts. Inside the command center, Varzul watched the security feeds with growing horror. His warriors were falling, their weapons useless against the relentless human assault. The humans had turned their own strategy against them. They had become hunters, and they were unstoppable. Varzul turned to his officers. "We must evacuate. Call the fleet. We need extraction now." But no fleet was coming. The humans had destroyed their ships. They were trapped. The final door to the command center burst open. Daniel Carter stepped through, his rifle raised, his eyes cold and focused. Behind him, his fighters moved in like a tide, weapons aimed at the last Selenar leaders. Varzul stared at the humans in disbelief. These creatures, these weak, fragile beings, how had they done this? Carter stepped forward. "It's over." Varzul's claws clenched. "You think this is a victory? We are the XLNR. We have conquered 100 worlds. You are nothing compared to us." Carter tilted his head. "Then why are you the ones begging for your lives?" Varzul's eyes widened. He looked around, saw his remaining officers drop their weapons and surrender, and he realized the truth. The XLNR were finished. By morning, the command center was in ruins. The last Selenar forces had been wiped out. The remaining survivors were captured. For the first time since the invasion began, Earth was free. The war was over. But for humanity, this was just the beginning. They had faced the galaxy's most feared conquerors, and won. And now, they had a new purpose. If the Selenar had attacked Earth, then others could too. So humanity would do what they did best. They would prepare. They would evolve. And the next time aliens came to their world, it wouldn't be a war. It would be an extermination. The war was over. For the first time since the Selenar invasion, the skies above Earth were clear. Their massive warships, once symbols of fear and destruction, were nothing but burning wreckage. Their armies, once unstoppable, had been crushed. Their leaders, once so confident, were either dead or captured. Humanity had won. But victory was only the beginning. Daniel Carter stood on a rooftop, overlooking the ruins of New York. The city, once filled with towering skyscrapers and bright lights, was now a shadow of what it had been. Smoke still rose from the battlefield. Buildings lay in rubble. The scars of war covered the land. Yet, among the destruction, something new was rising. Humans were rebuilding. In the streets below, survivors worked together, clearing debris, setting up shelters, repairing what they could. Engineers repurposed Selenar technology, studying their weapons and machines. Scientists examined the remains of enemy ships, learning their secrets. Humanity had suffered, but they had survived. And now, they were stronger than ever. Inside a repurposed Selenar command bunker, the leaders of the resistance gathered. Maps covered the walls, showing not just Earth, but the stars beyond. Lisa, their top engineer, pointed at the star charts. The Selenar came from here, she said, tapping a distant system. Their empire stretches across dozens of planets, but they relied on Earth as a key supply point. Now that we've taken it back, their forces are in chaos. Marcus, their best sniper and strategist, crossed his arms. So what happens next? Do we just wait for them to recover and attack us again? Carter's gaze was cold. No, we don't wait. He turned to the others. The Selenar made one mistake. They showed us the galaxy. They proved that we're not alone. But they also proved that we are stronger than anyone thought. Lisa nodded. We've been analyzing their technology. We can rebuild Earth, but we can also expand. We can take their ships, modify their weapons. We don't have to stay here and wait for another invasion. A silence filled the room. The idea was unspoken, but now it hung in the air. Humanity had spent the war defending itself. Now they had the chance to go on the offensive. Marcus smirked. So, we're doing it. We're going after them. Carter looked at the maps again. The Selenar had fought themselves to be the greatest warriors in the galaxy. They had been wrong. And now, it was time to make sure the rest of the universe knew it too. He turned back to his team. We don't just rebuild Earth. We take the fight to them. Lisa grinned. I'll get the ships ready. Months passed. The ruins of Earth became the foundation of something greater. The remaining Selenar prisoners were forced to reveal their knowledge, maps, military tactics, weaknesses in their empire. Humanity learned everything. The first human warships were built, using a mix of human and alien technology. Stronger, faster, more deadly than anything that Selenar had ever created. Cities were reborn, but now they were filled with spaceports, training grounds, and military installations. Earth was no longer just a home. It was the capital of a rising power. The first fleet was assembled in orbit. Hundreds of newly built ships, armed with advanced weaponry, stood ready. Soldiers, trained for a new kind of war, prepared for their next mission. At the command of the fleet, Daniel Carter stood on the bridge of the largest warship, the Vengeance. A former Selenar officer, one of the few survivors who had been forced to help, trembled as he looked at the fleet. You're leaving Earth. Carter nodded. Your kind didn't just attack us. You attacked the wrong species. The alien's eyes widened. You plan to go to war with the Selenar Empire. Carter gave a small smile. Not just war. He turned to his crew. Set course for the Selenar homeworld. The engines roared to life. The ships moved into formation. And for the first time in history, humanity was not just fighting to survive. They were fighting to conquer. As the fleet vanished into the stars, the message was clear. Humanity was no longer prey. They were no longer the ones being hunted. Now, they were the hunters, and the galaxy would never be the same again.